God's much more grace is what we need each and every day. But how do we live this way? Just keep receiving it. That, in a nutshell, is what today's message is all about from Pastor Bob Hoekstra, and welcome to Living in Christ. Now, we've already laid out the root of all of our problems and the reason for our defeats. Now we're ready to receive the fountain of all of God's remedies, or you could say, the resources for all of God's victories. It's what we desperately need. Here's Bob with more in Romans 5:17.
Those who receive abundance of grace and of the gift of righteousness will reign in life. It's about where are you getting your life? Is it from Adam and his succeeding generations, or is it from Christ? There are only two sources to choose from. And that's the way the Scriptures present it. There's one man we're all connected with, Adam. And it's unto sin and death reigns over that family. But there's another man to follow. There's another man to get connected with. There's another man to draw a new kind of life from, and that man is the perfect man who was the eternal Son of God. And reigning in life is, notice it, through the one, Jesus Christ. God's not sitting back far off in heaven above, looking at our struggle on earth below, wondering, do you think you can conquer? What a despair that would bring. No, He's there ready to pour out this gift of righteousness to bring us into a new life in Christ, and then an abundance of grace to build and develop that life in Christ. Reigning in life is all about who you're connected to for your life source. Through our relationship with Jesus, our trust in Christ, all He did, who He is, and what He wants to provide for us, that's how we reign in life. That's where we find victory. Everyone on earth, that would include us, by the way, everyone on earth is either drawing upon Adam, number one, Adam, and they're being ruled by death, or they're drawing upon the life that's in Christ and they're learning to reign in that life. Those are the only options. People say, well, why only two options? Well, because one is wrong and one is right. What would a third one be? Irrelevant? There are only two. And that's as it should be. Reigning in life is through the one, Jesus Christ. Think of it. Believers. Most of us, I know, are Christians, disciples of Christ. Think of it. This is why it's so deadly to walk according to the flesh. What is the flesh? That's Adam's human resources. Everyone on earth has it. We got it by natural birth. When we take charge ourselves and we're going to make life happen, even if we're born again Christians, a deadness reigns over us. Not a condemnation to hell. That's settled because we have the gift of righteousness. But if we're not drawing on the abundance of grace that's in Christ, that is living by His Spirit, deadness will reign over us. And we all know what that's like. This is not theoretical. This is propositional truth that is lived out every day by each one of us. We either choose life in Christ or we choose deadness out of our own resolve, will, or cleverness, or schemes, or you name it. And think of this. Think on this phrase for a minute. Much more. Right in the middle of the verse. For if by the one man's offense death reigned through the one, much more those who receive abundance of grace and of the gift of righteousness will reign in life through the one Jesus Christ. Picture this. The magnitude of the tragedy, the agony, the sin and death and despair for those that are only connected with Adam's natural fallen life, and death has been reigning over them through their life, and they're on a planet where death has been reigning for thousands of years. How much unrighteousness, how much defeat, how much despair, how much bondage does that represent? Take our own lives, the years before we came to Christ. How much sin, how much guilt, how much condemnation, how much failure. Oh, mine was being weighed by the tons as I was found wanting without Christ. That's the reality to which this little phrase, much more, is addressed. For if by the one man's offense death reigned through the one, okay, that's all of that devastation. Much more. Now here's something that's bigger than that. Here's something that's not just an inch more or a pound more, but it's much more. The victory and provision of grace and righteousness we find in Christ is way, way more than all the devastation that we experienced and contributed to in Adam. That only gives us hope personally, but if anyone comes to us for help, here's their hope. You might say, well, I'm ministering to this person and it just looks impossible. I mean, they've got so much of the reign of death in their life. Well, you know, the remedy is much more than what they're facing. For if by the one man's offense death reigned through the one, much more those who receive abundance of grace and of the gift of righteousness will reign in life through the one, Jesus Christ. Okay, in conclusion, how do you live this way? How do you live? By the grace of forgiveness in Christ and then abundance of grace for an ongoing developing life of victory. How do you live that way? How do you live by an abundance of grace? Keep receiving it every day. Start out each day this way. When you're stretched and sense defeat or perplexity, impossibility through the day, again turn to the Lord, crying out for abundance of grace for the situation. Really, it's about a life of humble dependence upon the Lord. The victory is through the one, Jesus Christ. It's not something we manufacture or muster up. It's realities given by grace from a gracious Lord and Master. Humble dependence. That's right. Humility and faith. That's how life is to be lived. James 4:6 says, God is opposed to the proud, but He gives grace to the humble. You can't earn grace. It's no longer grace. Grace must be given. And to whom does God give it? The humble. Boy, how do you do that? It isn't how do you do it. It's do you agree with God or not? If you agree with God concerning what He said about you, and same for me, then you're willing to walk humbly with your God. Sinful, no righteousness in us that's innate. Every good thing must come from God. If that's your confession, you're willing to walk humbly with your God. It's an expression of need. Lord, I desperately need what this verse offers. But not just humility. Humility concerning ourselves. Lord, I'm a needy person. But faith. Romans 5:2 says that it's through faith that we access this grace in which we stand. Trusting in the Lord, not only saying I'm needy, but Lord, I see You're a bountiful supplier. I'm going to trust in this truth. Faith accesses grace. You tell the Lord your great need, oh, He wants to pour out grace upon you. You enter into that grace by saying, Lord, I'm trusting You to supply what I need on these matters. That's pretty simple, isn't it? What a kind God. He just wants us to admit our need and trust that He is the supply of our need. You know, a relationship, not a religion, a relationship. And that's what this is all about, because reigning in life is through the one, Jesus Christ. Oh, much more grace. Brethren, there's much more than we've ever yet heard of, ever thought of, ever tasted, or will ever need to find victory and fruitfulness in life on this earth below while we're being prepared for heaven above.
What we need to live is in Christ, and as we draw on His abundance of grace, we'll experience victory. Today on Living in Christ, we heard a portion of Bob Hoekstra's study, God's Much More Grace in Christ. You can listen to it in its entirety when you visit livinginchrist.org on the web. Then go to Media. You can also request a CD, and we suggest a donation of $5 for that. Call us toll-free, 877-600-LICM. That's 877-600-LICM. You can also find us on YouTube now. Subscribe for free and listen when it's most convenient. Just search for Living in Christ Ministries. Pastor Bob has written 365 daily devotions on the grace of God, one for each day of the year. Grow in grace right along with us. You can find today's reading at livinginchrist.org when you click on Devotional. You might also want to order the Day by Day by Grace coffee mug. Enjoy a cup of coffee with your morning devotions. That too is available at livinginchrist.org. And we'd love to hear how God is using this daily radio broadcast in your life. In fact, it would make our day. You can email us through the website at livinginchrist.org. And here's our mailing address, Living in Christ, P.O. Box 2848, Costa Mesa, California, 92628. And again, our toll-free number, 877-600-LICM. Hey, tomorrow we'll begin a new series centered around eschatology, the study of end times. Living in Christ with Bob Hoekstra is presented by Living in Christ Ministries.